You're listening to Veterans for Recovery, a podcast that unpacks all things recovery within our extended military family. Join your host, retired Major John Donovan, a noted author, lecturer, and person in long-term recovery from substance use disorder, as he and his guests will break down current trending topics and research, along with all things recovery related to increasing recovery resilience and recovery capital within our veteran and service member communities. Now here's your host, Major John Donovan.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Veterans for Recovery. This is a podcast that looks at all things pertaining to our veterans, service members, and their family members who are in recovery or seeking recovery. I'm John Donovan, a retired major of the U.S. Army, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. With me today is my guest, Lieutenant Colonel retired Sam Andrews. Today, Sam and I will explore what recovery means and how it impacts the lives of our veterans. Sam, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm really excited about this conversation.
I'm excited too, John. Thanks for offering the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are doing some amazing work with our veterans. But first, I want to get into a little bit of your background. And in the interest of full disclosure, Lieutenant Colonel Sam Andrews and I both served in the Minnesota National Guard. Although our paths crossed a couple of times, we didn't work directly with one another. But first of all, Colonel, tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, education, and your profession.
Yeah, you bet. I spent 27 years in the service, both enlisted and as an officer. I enlisted in the Marine Corps right out of high school. I think I left maybe 3 weeks after we graduated, and served 4 years in the Corps. Most of my time was with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, and a couple deployments. And then I meritoriously promoted to corporal and then promoted to sergeant 9 months later. So I had about a year as a sergeant when I EAS'd out of the Marine Corps. I kind of had my sights set on attending college, and I enrolled at the University of St. Thomas to pursue a degree in business. John, I think maybe so I got out in July. I don't do math in public. July, August, September, October, I joined the Guard. So about 3 months later, I joined 2-135 in West St. Paul, sort of the, Metro's infamous rifle company. Man, I just missed the camaraderie. I missed, the training. I missed, all those kinds of intangibles that you get in service. And so, I was able to fill a fire team leader and then later a squad leader position there.
So I didn't know that about you. Again, our paths have crossed professionally, but I didn't know that you were prior enlisted and prior enlisted in the Marine Corps. Hoorah. Were you an 0311 then?
I was a rifleman, you bet. The Marine Corps is a tough place, right? Like physically demanding, mentally demanding, but just, made up of incredible Americans, willing to do the hard stuff. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn about personal discipline. You learn about like what your body can physically and mentally handle, because the guys to the left and right of you are just, they're doing the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the Corps. So many of the guys that I served with, Mike Wiedrich, for example, he was one of our JAG lawyers. He'd served in the Corps. Jeff Howe, I think he spent some time in the Navy, but I think also he had a Corps background. One of the things I love about the Corps is this, the honor and the tradition and how much they focus on their history. But this idea too that officers eat last, and the ranking officer eats last. So if they're in there with a bunch of enlisted and officers, and there's a general officer, you will see him being the last person to go through the chow line. I just love that about the Corps.
Yes, sir. Very, common practice there to make sure the guys eat first.
And Sam, so you were an 0311, you became an 11 Bravo in St. Paul, and then how did you pursue your commission?
Do you remember Operation Gold Rush?
I
So
do.
yeah, so the brigade hosted Operation Gold Rush up at Camp Ripley in partnership with the recruiting battalion, and they wandered up there and kind of looked at the different options. And for me professionally and personally, I picked the ROTC route at the University of Minnesota. So um, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, PT, and then class at the U, and then drive back to St. Thomas to finish out my day.
Incredible. So you were a busy, busy man during your college years.
That is true. And then, right, I mean, literally like commencement, the week of commencement, we had 9/11. Um, and then we all knew, it was kind of game on from there. Like it wasn't going to be a short war. I didn't think, at the time that, it would have lasted, 20 plus years. Um, but stay the path, get commissioned, and then, return to West St. Paul as a platoon leader. Um, Yeah, so let's see. Commission in May, OBC in June. I mean, literally like 3 weeks maybe. Yeah, end of May, first part of June. Returned slightly early. I got to miss a lot of the fanfare, final weapons cleaning and the actual graduation, so I could drive back and you know do the soldier readiness process, SRP, and deploy on. I think we deployed like the 10th of October, if memory serves me right, of 2003. I think we started, Muta 5 or whatever, or, pre-SRP stuff at Camp Ripley, and then off to Fort Stewart, Georgia for the better part of 3 months.
So you deployed to Bosnia at that time?
No, Kosovo.
Kosovo. Okay. So I
Yep.
was in Bosnia and you were in Kosovo. Those two tours kind of overlapped with one another.
They did, yeah, pretty remarkable, right? The state of Minnesota to generate the capability to deploy, functionally, two general officer headquarters supported by, you know, for the most part, Minnesota-based, infantry units and some of the combat service support organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a little bit of a flare up while you guys were in Kosovo, was there not?
We were, yeah. So I mean, kind of fascinating, right? So the March 17th riots, unseasonably warm, a lot of kind of churn about um, self-determination, the validity of 1244, UN Resolution 1244, which essentially ordered the belligerents, across their respective um, border at the time, so provincial border with Serbia. Um, and the news had reported that some Serbian men had used a dog and ran kids into I think it's the Ibar River up there in Mitrovica, and reported them being drowned, and that was really kind of the flashpoint for about a week long series of riots by the ethnic Albanians. And so my platoon, we strong pointed a church in Vatina and then ran security patrols out of there to, at that point, really protect the Serbs from, looting and violence and arson. That was long couple of weeks that we spent, quite literally just at this Orthodox church at the kind of tail end of the city there to, provide presence and reinforce, kind of a safe and secure environment for the time that event occurred.
Yeah, outstanding stuff. I know when I was in Bosnia and we were getting briefed on what was going down in Kosovo, you guys played a major role in bringing that to a successful, peaceful resolution. So this is your third deployment. You deployed twice with the Marines, now with the Minnesota National Guard. Future deployments, other deployments?
Yeah, so I ultimately did 3 more. Back to Kosovo in I think 2000. It's kind of blurs out, right? 2007, 2008. It was there when Kosovo declared independence in February 20 of 2008. Um, Came back from that deployment and then right back into the training cycle um, for the, I think it was 10, 11 or 11, 12, the brigade deployment that Kurska took.
Right.
Another great time, tons of great training, a lot of operations. We were predominantly the convoy escort unit that ran the long haul mission sets from Kuwait to various hubs in Iraq, and then other orgs would spoke out from there. So also during the time of the drawdown. So we Colonel Kursk and I and the PSD team, we were one of the last sets of Caymans to cross the Iraqi and Kuwaiti border, and they shut the fence to end the war. I say that in air quotes because within 6 months ISIS emerged and rolled up much of the Iraqi formations, and the war kind of started another manifestation of conflict. And then in between there, in between my last deployment and that deployment, I went to the School of Advanced Military Studies. It's an operational art and science course. It's an accredited school that awards a master's degree. And so I think on average, Sean, we read like 250 pages a day, school 3 days a week, study day and a monograph day. I wrote a monograph on the history of the 34th Infantry Division and General Ryder in the North African campaign. And then from there, I went to the division, and that was just a constant churn at the division with, tons of travel, literally around the world to work with partners and allies to exercise, high intensity conflict and nation state warfare. And then we did a warfighter, turned right around and prepped for deployment to Kuwait again, where I was chief of plans and part of Operation Spartan Shield, where we provided, theater security cooperation, support throughout the, Arabian Peninsula and the Levant. Travel to a couple neat countries there. Work with partners, and then, provide capability to, the CENTCOM commander and support OIR, Operation Inherent Resolve, and the Defeat ISIS mission.
Incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. And thank you for your service. 6 deployments, ladies and gentlemen, 6 deployments. And Sam, I want to transition now into kind of the work that you're doing. And it certainly has been molded, shaded, if you will, by some of your deployment experiences and some of the people that you deployed with. And what I'm referring to specifically is post-traumatic stress disorder. And you have, on a very personal level, seen the devastating effect that can have on our troops. Can you talk to that for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, you bet. So to kind of set that up, I came home from that 2019 deployment, just kind of wore out and tired, looking for something less exciting and more at home time. And we all know COVID happened. So it felt like, quite literally out of the frying pan and into the fire. And so COVID, the George Floyd riots, the subsequent trials, the continued COVID, working with our state partners, to help, our most vulnerable adults manage the pandemic. So there's 3 more state active duty deployments that were, kind of round the clock for pretty extensive periods of time. And so during this, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to retire. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Maybe I'll go to business school at the University of Minnesota. So I applied to Carlson and was accepted there. And as I, reblued my business skills, I started to kind of dig into the healthcare space, because why not trade one really complex job for another? At least
Of
it'll,
course.
right, like keep you busy and all those good things. So I really started to understand our healthcare system. As I retired, I transitioned into the corporate leader program at Optum, which is part of United Health Group, and I served as a director of healthcare operations for about 2.5 years. So incredible opportunity to learn and understand healthcare, and then take that healthcare knowledge and then help apply it to the Bravo Zulu House, which I can talk about here shortly. So just some kind of raw statistics, right? VA's own records, from a statistic perspective, but we lose about 22 service members a day to suicide. So that's 6,500 a year, every year since 9/11. So we're pushing kind of 150. And generally, it's agreed to that those numbers are under reported. Those that struggle with the confluence of PTSD and substance abuse are significantly more likely than those without those two diagnoses, like significantly at greater risk for suicide. So about kind of, I don't know, early 24-ish, I meet a guy named Tim Murray who is in the process of raising money to build America's first sober home for veterans with PTSD. And I think to myself, Tim, I mean, just based on the statistics, right? 30,000 veterans a month exit one of the 15,000 inpatient treatment facilities, so about 2 vets per location every month. And you're telling me that there's exactly 0 sober homes for these guys. He's like, yep. I'm like, okay, Boomer, maybe you don't know how to work the Google. Let me check the Google. So I check the Google and the Google returns a goose egg. I'm like, well, let me spend some time trying to figure this out. So, you ask Google a couple different ways. You try Chat GPT, try Grok, try Gemini, and it comes back with nothing. And so I'm like, holy moly, this is a huge gap in veterans healthcare that needs to be addressed. And I think Bravo Zulu House is certainly one of the answers to addressing, long-term recovery. So again, more statistics, right? So if a person attends an inpatient treatment program and they can stay sober for 60 days, they've got a 50% chance of long-term sobriety. Now add, 4 years and 10 months to that, and their probability only increases to 85%. So said another way, it's critical for our veterans who are both struggling with PTSD and addiction to number one, be open to an intervention, check yourself in. But first go get sober and then, stay sober by living in a sober living house with other veterans.
Yeah, incredible stuff. And you've unpackaged that so well for us. But this idea of PTSD, we've talked about it, we've read about it, but couple that with a soldier who is living with substance use disorder, and it becomes one of the major obstacles, one of the major hurdles that has to be overcome for long-term recovery to take place. And so this cycle happens where the person is in recovery, and recovery that is from substance use disorder, but they have untreated, unrecognized PTSD. And they're at a fireworks display. They hear a car backfire, a door slams. One of their buddies becomes that statistic of 1 in the 22 that take their lives every day. And this person becomes triggered, and they use to medicate the pain, and the cycle starts over. I know you've been touched with some of the people that you deployed with have had some of those lingering consequences. Can you talk about that a little bit and how this has impacted you personally?
Yeah, so my information operations officer served with him, every day on the deployment and many of the exercises leading up to it. We got home together in 19. We sent him to the psychological operations course. He was the honor grad there, or distinguished honor grad, the #1 graduate. And married, couple girls. And in June of 21, he walked out his front door dressed in his best suit with his pistol in his pocket, and took his own life. And we found him just about a block from the house, leaned up against a tree. And after the coroner came down from Hennepin County and confirmed, yes, indeed it was a suicide. Yes, indeed the tool was a pistol. Couple other guys that I were part of the planes team on that deployment picked him up and put him in a body bag. So that's one of like 13, really, since that one specific incident that we buried, and it's almost exclusively due to substance abuse disorder and PTSD. And it's a tough thing. I think the cycle that you described, it's really challenging to #1 break, right? Like, seek the help you need.
Yeah.
And then followed up with, some PTSD therapy in an environment that you've already developed those skills to cope with, sort of the reprocessing of that trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And our hearts go out to you and the soldiers' family. All those servicemen and women who carry some of those internal scars. I think of a chaplain that we both served with, Chaplain John Morris. He said nobody comes back from war unscathed. It's just that some of the wounds are visible and external, and many of them are internal. But nobody comes back from war unscathed.
Yeah, he's a great man too. Another guy that's, saved many, many lives by, providing counsel, and then, helping, soldiers and airmen, kind of into the right track to start their healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's turn this now to Bravo Zulu. So we identified this problem. Our men and women, our service members, have a combat experience, or and even if they didn't deploy, just being in the military is stressful. It's long hours, separation from family, separation from friends. Just when you become knowledgeable in your job, they're like, okay, well, you're not going to do that anymore. We're going to promote you, and now you're going to do something completely different, and we're going to send you a 3-month school, a 6-month school, 9, 12 months, or God forbid, you get to do a distance learning. So it means you get a full-time job plus 3 to 4 hours in the evening studying, trying to raise kids, trying to have a family. It's a stressful lifestyle. And sometimes our servicemen and women will turn to alcohol to help them cope with that stress. And that becomes a solution, and then the solution eventually becomes the problem. And that, coupled with post-traumatic stress disorder, you talk about comorbidity, we talked just The last episode with Dr. Heidi Bausch-Ryan talked about the coupling, the nexus between substance use disorder and mental health, and how the whole field now is morphing and changing to address both of these issues, mental health and substance use disorder, while people are going through treatment. But you and Tim Murray and the team over at Bravo Zulu, you have stumbled upon a solution, and that is camaraderie, community, a sober living environment for veterans. And not only will they get support for their substance use problem, but they will also have an opportunity to engage in mental health therapy, addressing post-traumatic stress disorder. Why is this important? Why is this a potential template for the rest of the United States, Sam?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in part it's a service issue, but in part it's a society issue. The New York Times just published an article. I would encourage the listening audience to Google Boy Crisis of 2025 meets the boy problem of the 1900s. And in this article, it argues that there aren't places for boys and men to connect in a meaningful way. Many of them have transitioned into, um, co-ed spaces, and those co-ed spaces. So, the scouts of Boy Scouts are now Scouting of America. About 30% of that program, women or young girls participate in, while simultaneously the Girl Scouts are exclusively for girls. Same thing with the YMCA, and the only sort of civic organization that offers that is the Boys and Girls Club, and I think they've since rebranded. But it's a good article to kind of help us think about the challenges that men and young boys, or boys in general, face. So what's the Bravo Zulu House? The Bravo Zulu House is a brand new Shoust or barn dominium. It's 13 total bedrooms, ADA compliant with a lift. So if any of our veterans struggle with mobility issues like lost wheel or wheelchair bound, we've got a space for them. And what it does is provide, individual rooms for $600 a month. So kind of premise number one is dignified living area. The second thing is we have a full-time case manager that will enroll each of our residents into the Mayo Clinic's addiction and PTSD therapy program. So depending on, the severity of either, they'll do an assessment and then program the right clinical support. Part of the other aspect of, rebuilding, men who have served, that sense of purpose. So work or volunteer 30 hours a week, attend your, AA meetings, be receptive to a spiritual coach. So different than religion, but I think the key there is that there's a higher power. He may be God, he may be something else, and that the challenges of addiction require a spiritual awakening. And then a couple other programs that we'll offer in addition to that. So think kind of mind, body, spirit. John, I do PT every day. Lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then we run 7 days a week. So somewhere in the 25 to 30 miles a week. Part of that's just like good mental health. Part of it's just good fitness. And so we'll offer physical fitness coaching. So if somebody just simply needs to, walk twice a day for 15 minutes, or, take their CrossFit to the next level, we'll offer, a tailored plan to meet them where they're at. And then canine therapy. Canine therapy is incredibly important from a wellness perspective. There's a ton of evidence out there that supports individuals who participate in canine therapy programs are much more likely to have positive outcomes with their PTSD and addiction related challenges. And then finally, hydroponic farm, it's an opportunity to grow leafy greens and other vegetables, and then sell those to the farm to fork type operations. And then that money is deposited into a savings account. And so when that veteran leaves the home, they've got some cash in the bank from their efforts in the hydroponic farm for first and last month's rent or down payment on a car. And the proportion of that revenue sharing business will be dependent on the portion of time that individual commits to the hydroponic farm.
Wow, incredible. So we're really talking about a holistic approach here. We're talking about engaging the person physically through physical exercise, PT, meeting them where they are. If they're not a runner like you, we're going to start them out walking, right? Baby steps to the elevator and get them into a routine where they're taking care of their physical self. And then mentally, the astounding, world-renowned Mayo Clinic, uh, bringing their talents and their expertise to working with the issues of substance use disorder, ongoing care, ongoing recovery, building recovery capital, and also addressing post-traumatic stress disorder. The spiritual part, where you mentioned self-help, whether that be Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Smart Recovery, any of the abstinence-based programs that will enhance a person's recovery. And then not only that, this isn't a hand out as much as a hand up. So canine therapy, working with dogs, and then also the opportunity to be involved in farming. We also know that's very therapeutic, right? Working with our hands, growing things. There's a connection to the land, to the earth. That is just good therapy. This is an incredible program, Sam. um, who can obtain it? Who can, are you open for admissions now? Do you take veterans? How would they get into this program?
You bet. So we've done a fairly significant amount of outreach, both to, private treatment facilities as well as the local VA. We've had three referrals from the RTP program in St. Cloud, one from Tennessee, and Saturday we welcomed our first resident, um, who has recently, completed his stay at St. Cloud. So, what do we mean by eligibility? I think there's kind of two key aspects. Um, One is, be a veteran, and then the second is have, a concurrent diagnosis of both PTSD and substance abuse disorder. Um, Outside of that, John, I mean, we do have a couple of restrictions um, on eligibility. I don't expect um, us to, necessarily run into that um, type of a veteran, but kind of two, theft by swindle, financial crimes, and then, sex crimes involving minors. That those are kind of two areas that we're not, equipped to deal with. And so those would really be the only kind of two things that um, would exclude a person from participation.
But I want to be clear about this, and for our listeners, because although in Minnesota, this is not a Minnesota centric program, you would take referrals from California to Florida to New York, across the nation.
You bet. Absolutely. So national program, last week I met with Semper Fi and America's Fund. The nurses there deal with some of the most challenging cases for wounded veterans, both, visible and invisible. And I've got some contacts on the West Coast, and the panel that particular case manager manages, we would certainly take their veterans post treatment. Absolutely.
And then I want to, in closing here, just let you talk for a minute or two. Supposing our listeners are listening to this and they're like, I didn't serve, or I'm not in recovery from substance use disorder, but I believe in this program. This is incredible stuff. How can they be involved? What can they do to help further this mission?
You bet. So, John, I think we learned this from you. Um, Number one, if you're local to Minnesota and are compelled to volunteer your time, it seems to be kind of an endless, work in and around the farm to finish some area beautification and landscaping, etc. So, number one, you could volunteer your time. Number two, you could make a financial contribution uh, to the program. I think we have one kennel suite left, so a $5,000 donation, for example, will, you know, um, have your family name or your company, engraved on that kennel suite. And then, um, lastly, if you can't do a donation or you're not local, there may be somebody in your network that you could connect me with, and I could talk to them about the Bravo Zulu House and, kind of peel back their network and see if there is someone in that network that would be, willing to sponsor Bravo Zulu House, whether it's a corporate sponsorship or just an individual gift.
And then also moms, dads, sweethearts, spouses who are living with or know somebody who is recovering from substance use disorder and PTSD. They could also contact you for more information about how they can seek help for their loved one.
Absolutely.
Sam, this has been a fascinating conversation. We're rolling up here to the end point. Do you have anything that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I appreciate, your time and support, John, on the platform to get the word out, really on the crisis in veteran healthcare and how we think we're going to close that gap. And I'm just really grateful of your time, and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been an absolute honor. We've been talking to Lieutenant Colonel retired Sam Andrews, a soldier extraordinaire who is working with Bravo Zulu House. Bravo Zulu House is a veteran sober living environment that is helping veterans who are recovering from substance use disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a one-of-a-kind house in the United States, and looking to template this much needed model across the other states so that no matter where a veteran lives, they'll be able to access the care that they so richly deserve. I'd like to thank all of our listeners for being with us today, and mostly Lieutenant Colonel Andrews for sharing with us and contributing to today's topic. Our listeners, thank you so much for your support, your notes, your letters, your comments. It is always gratifying to hear that you're listening to this program, and we hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Veterans for Recovery. This has been a podcast of the Coming Home Well Network. Until next time, be well, think well, and do well. This is Major John Donovan signing off.
You've been listening to Veterans for Recovery, a Coming Home Well podcast. We value your feedback. Please be sure to leave a review. Share and download this episode. We thank our veterans and service members for your service to our country. We thank our friends and families for their support. And thank you for listening to Veterans for Recovery.